I've always hated taking the late-night bus, but that evening, I didn't have much choice. My night class at the community college had run over some debate about existential philosophy that dragged on until the professor finally called it quits at 10:30 p.m. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the city streets into slick mirrors that reflected the blurry glow of streetlights. Driving wasn't an option. My car was in the shop for a busted alternator, and I wasn't about to shell out for a rideshare on my student budget. So there I was, huddled under the bus shelter, my backpack slung over one shoulder, waiting for the number 12 to lumber around the corner. When it finally arrived, the doors hissed open with a sigh, releasing a puff of warm, stale air that smelled like wet coats and faint exhaust. I climbed aboard, flashing my pass at the driver, a burly guy with a graying beard who barely glanced up from his dashboard. The bus was about half full, a mix of tired souls scattered across the seats. Up front, a businessman in a rumpled suit dozed with his head against the window, his tie loosened like a noose that had given up. A few rows back, a woman in her 30s scrolled endlessly on her phone, the blue light casting shadows on her face. Behind her, an older man clutched a briefcase on his lap, his foot tapping in erratic rhythm against the floor like he was counting down to something. I made my way to the middle, dropping into a seat by the window. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered occasionally, buzzing like distant insects. And the cold metallic temps of the bus mingled with the dampness seeping in from outside. The streets were nearly empty at this hour, just the occasional car splashing through puddles, its headlights cutting brief paths through the rain. Faint chatter drifted from the front to passengers murmuring about the weather, or maybe the latest news, but it was subdued. Everyone wrapped in their own little worlds. I leaned back, staring out at the passing buildings, their windows dark and uninviting. My stop was about 20 minutes away. I figured I'd zone out with some music, but my earbuds were dead, just my luck. The bus rumbled on, tires squeaking against the wet pavement, the wipers slapping back and forth in a hypnotic rhythm. We made a couple of stops, picking up a straggler here and there. But as the clock ticked past 11, the pickups dwindled. The rain eased to a drizzle, but the night felt heavier, the streetlights flickering more erratically like they were struggling to stay lit. I glanced at my phone. Signal was spotty, but the time read 11:15. Not long now. Then at a stop that looked like any other, a dimly lit corner with a bench shrouded in shadows, the bus groaned to a halt. The doors opened, and I expected maybe a late-night worker or someone dodging the rain, but no one else was there except a small child, standing alone under the faint glow of the shelter. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, dressed in old, ill-fitting clothes, oversized coat that hung to his knees, pants rolled up at the cuffs, and shoes that looked scuffed and too big. His hair was matted from the rain, and he clutched a small backpack like it was his only lifeline. The child boarded slowly, his steps deliberate, almost hesitant. He paid with a handful of coins that clinked into the fare box, then turned and walked down the aisle. His eyes scanned the passengers, lingering a beat too long on each face, like he was searching for something specific. The businessman stirred, but didn't wake. The woman glanced up briefly before returning to her screen. The man with the briefcase stopped tapping, watching the kid with mild curiosity. Finally, the child stopped beside my row and slid into the seat across the aisle from me, his small frame barely filling the space. He didn't say a word, just stared straight ahead, his hands folded in his lap. I shifted uncomfortably, wondering where his parents were. Who lets a kid that young ride the bus alone at this hour? I debated asking, but something about his silence stopped me. The bus lurched forward, and the doors closed with a finality that echoed through the quiet. A minute or two passed, the rain pattering against the windows. Then, without looking at me, the child reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He leaned across the aisle and slipped it into my hand, his fingers cold as ice. I unfolded it, my heart giving a little jolt. Scrawled in childish handwriting were 3 words: "Don't get off." I stared at the note, a chill crawling up my spine. Was this a joke? Some kid's prank? I looked at him, but he was back to staring ahead, his expression blank, almost vacant. I glanced around the bus. No one else seemed to have noticed the exchange. The woman was still on her phone, the businessman snoring softly, the briefcase man resuming his tapping. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror, his gaze lingering with a strange, knowing expression that made my stomach twist. He looked away, but not before a faint smile tugged at his lips. I crumpled the note in my fist, telling myself it was nothing. Kids do weird things, right? Maybe he was scared or playing a game. But as the bus rolled on, passing familiar stops, I couldn't shake the unease. At the next stop, a couple near the front stood up and exited, their footsteps echoing on the steps. Through the window, I watched them step onto the sidewalk, but they didn't walk away, just stood there in the darkness, staring back at the bus as it pulled off, their faces pale and unmoving under the streetlight. Weird, but maybe they were waiting for someone. Another stop, and the woman with the phone got off. Same thing, she stepped down, then froze on the curb, her eyes locked on the bus as we drove away. The rain had stopped, but the night felt colder, the shadows deeper. I looked back at the child. He hadn't moved, his small hands still clasped tightly. The driver glanced in the mirror again, that knowing look sharper now, like he was in on some secret I wasn't privy to. My internal conflict raged. This is ridiculous, I thought. The note's probably a mistake, meant for someone else. Or the kid's just messing around. But doubt gnawed at me. What if it was a warning? Sinister thoughts crept in. Human trafficking, some urban legend come to life. I considered showing the note to another passenger, but the bus was thinning out. The businessman woke with a start at his stop, gathered his things, and disembarked. Sure enough, he stood there, staring as we left, joining the growing line of silent figures fading into the dark. The routes started changing. Street names: I New Elm, Maple. The turn onto Broad gave way to unfamiliar ones. Whisper Lane, Shadow Bend. The buildings outside looked older, their facades crumbling, windows like empty eyes. It was darker than it should be, the streetlights dimmer, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe on the pavement. Every time the bus stopped, more passengers got off, the briefcase man muttering to himself about the end as he stepped down, but no one new boarded. The bus felt emptier, the air thicker, claustrophobic, like the walls were closing in. The child leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "If you step off, they'll take you too," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the engine's hum. I jerked back, heart pounding. Who'll take me? But he just shook his head, eyes wide with fear. Outside, the shadows moved unnaturally. When the doors opened at the next stop, they stretched toward the entrance. Tendrils of darkness reaching like fingers, beckoning. A lone passenger, elderly woman I hadn't noticed before, got off. and the shadows seemed to envelop her as she stood, staring back. The doors closed and the bus pressed on, the fluorescent lights flickering more violently now, a metallic smell sharpening to something acrid, like fear itself. My mind spun. Get off at the next stop, I told myself. Call for help. But the child's words echoed. They'll take you too. The driver's glances in the mirror grew more frequent, his eyes gleaming with that unnatural knowing. A small incident jolted me. A passenger near the back stood abruptly, muttering incoherently about the loop, before bolting off at the stop. He joined the others, standing sentinel in the void. By now, the bus was nearly empty. Just me, the child, and the driver. The streets outside had dissolved into a featureless black. No signs, no lights, just endless darkness pressing against the windows. The final stop approached, or what felt like it. The bus slowed, doors hissing open to reveal nothing but void. End of the line, the driver called, his voice echoing strangely. Time to get off. The child gripped my hand, his small fingers like vices, shaking his head furiously. Panic surged. I couldn't stay, but stepping off meant. But the shadows outside pulsed, hungry. I stayed seated as the doors closed. The bus lurched forward, but there were no roads now, just darkness swallowing us whole. The child's grip tightened, and in the mirror, the driver smiled wide, his eyes black as the abyss we drove into. Or maybe I did step off. The void was silent, empty, and as I turned back, the bus was gone along with everything I knew. The sky was pitch black, except for the occasional smear of headlights from a passing truck, their beams slicing through the night like knives. The asphalt glistened like black glass, slick from a brief rain that had come and gone hours ago. Jack's pickup rattled along Highway 50, the loneliest stretch in Nevada, its engine a low growl against the silence. The air inside the cab smelled faintly of gasoline from his last stop at a rundown station 30 miles back, where the clerk had barely looked up from his phone. The faint hum of crickets drifted through the cracked window, but the deeper Jack drove, the quieter they got, as if the desert itself was swallowing sound. Jack rubbed his eyes, the ache of a 12-hour shift at the warehouse still heavy in his bones. He'd taken the night delivery to clear his head, too many bills piling up, too many fights with his ex over the phone. The package in the back, some urgent medical supplies for a clinic in Ely, was his excuse to keep moving, to outrun the noise in his head. The wipers scraped across the windshield, clearing streaks of dust and rain. Their rhythmic squeak the only thing keeping him grounded. Every now and then, a faint thump came from the truck's undercarriage, probably a loose bolt. He made a mental note to check it later, though later felt like a distant promise. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a flicker of movement. A figure stood on the shoulder, thumb out, bathed in the dim glow of his headlights. A hitchhiker out here, in the middle of nowhere. Jack's gut twisted. He didn't like picking up strangers, but the guy looked alone, almost too still, like he'd been planted there. He wore a corduroy jacket, faded and too heavy for the desert's lat summer heat, and a knit cap pulled low despite the mild night. Jack slowed, gravel crunching under his tires, and leaned over to crack the passenger door. "Where are you headed?" The man climbed in, moving with a slow, deliberate grace. "Just down the road," he said, his voice low and measured, each word clipped like he was reading from a script. His eyes caught the dashboard light, reflecting an odd silvery glint, like a cat's. Jack blinked, chalking it up to exhaustion. The guy smelled faintly of dust and something sharp, like old metal. "Name's Jack," he offered, trying to break the ice. The hitchhiker nodded but didn't offer a name. "You drive this road a lot?" he asked, staring straight ahead. "Sometimes deliveries, mostly." Jack glanced at him, waiting for more. But the man just sat there, hands folded, scarf loose around his neck, despite the stuffy cab. "You from around here?" The hitchhiker tilted his head as if the question puzzled him. "Have you ever been here before?" he asked instead, his tone flat but heavy, like it carried more weight than it should. A low, echoing synth-like hum seemed to pulse in Jack's ears, though the radio was off. He shook it off, blaming the truck's rumble. Yeah, I guess," Jack muttered, uneasy. He tried again. "So where are you trying to get to?" "Eerie, Tanopa." "Keep going," the man said. And that strange hum vibrated again, faint but unmistakable. It's like a sound from deep inside a dream. Jack's fingers tightened on the wheel. They drove in silence, the road unspooling endlessly. Then, up ahead, a faded billboard loomed. "Marty's Diner, best pie in 50 miles, exit 12. Jack frowned. He'd passed that same sign maybe 20 minutes ago, hadn't he? He glanced at the odometer, hadn't budged. His heart gave a little kick, but he told himself it was just a similar sign. The desert played tricks, kept driving, the wipers squeaking, the faint smell of rain lingering on the air. 10 minutes later, there it was again. Marty's Diner, best pie in 50 miles. Exit 12. Same chipped paint, same crooked angle. Jack's mouth went dry. He noticed a pothole just past it, the same one he'd swerved around earlier, and on the shoulder, a dead deer, its eyes glinting in the headlights, unchanged. "You see that?" he asked, voice tight. The hitchhiker didn't look. "Keep going," he said, that low hum pulsing again, louder now, like a heartbeat in the dark. Jack's skin prickled, but he couldn't stop his foot on the gas. The road looped again and again. Each time, the same billboard, the same pothole, the same deer. The radio hissed, spitting static that sounded almost like words before cutting out. Jack's hands shook as he passed a gas station, its lone clerk standing outside, staring at the road, unmoving. The next loop, the clerk was still there, still staring, his face blank. A red sedan roared past, its driver's face pale and twisted in panic. 10 minutes later, it passed again, the driver's expression even more desperate, like he was screaming silently. "This ain't right," Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. He glanced at the hitchhiker, who sat perfectly still, his eyes glinting again, unblinking. "What's going on? You know something, don't you?" "We're getting closer now," the man said, his words slow and heavy, that synth hum vibrating through the cab, shaking Jack's bones. The diner's lights flickered in the distance on, then off, then stuttering between loops like a broken film reel. A stray dog darted across the road, its eyes glowing red for a split second before it vanished into the dark. Jack's mind raced, memories of his ex's voice, his bosses shouting, the weight of unpaid bills flooding in, mixing with the growing dread. Was he losing it? Had he ever left the warehouse? He slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding. "I'm done," he snapped. "Tell me what's happening or you're out." The hitchhiker turned, his face to calm, his scarf fluttering, though the air was still. "You picked me up," he said. "You have to finish it." "Finish what?" Jack shouted. But the man just stared, his eyes reflecting that unnatural silver. Jack floored it toward an exit sign, determined to break free. The road curved, The sign grew closer, then vanished. He was back where he'd picked up the hitchhiker, the same stretch of highway, the same billboard in the distance. He turned to the passenger seat, heart pounding. It was empty. The scarf lay crumpled, but the man was gone. A cold breath grazed the back of Jack's neck, closed like someone was leaning over his shoulder. He froze, too afraid to look in the rearview mirror. The truck kept moving, though he swore his foot was off the gas. Then, in the headlights, he saw a figure on the roadside, thumb out, standing still. It was him. Jack, in his own jacket, his own tired face, waiting. The synth hum roared in his ears, and the road stretched on, looping forever. The highway stretched out like a scar across the Nevada desert. Its asphalt cracked and faded under the weight of years and neglect. I was hauling a load of medical supplies from Reno to Salt Lake City, my rig's engine humming a low, steady drone that had become my only companion on these long-haul runs. The main interstate was clogged with construction, so I'd taken Highway 6, a shortcut locals swore by, though it felt more like a punishment than a favor. It was past 11 p.m., and I was bone tired, the kind of tired that makes your eyes itch and your thoughts blur. My thermos of coffee had gone cold hours ago, leaving a bitter aftertaste that mingled with the faint diesel stink in the cab. I just wanted to get to Ely, drop the load, and crash in a motel bed that didn't smell like regret. Highway 6 was a ghost of a road, abandoned by everything but the wind. No signs had popped up for miles, just mile markers ticking by like a countdown to nowhere. The shoulders were overgrown with brittle grass that scratched at the edges of the pavement, whispering against my tires. Rusting guardrails leaned at odd angles, their paint peeling like dead skin. The air coming through the cracked window carried the dry, dusty scent of sagebrush, but it was starting to fade, replaced by something sharper ozone, maybe like the air before a storm. I couldn't shake the feeling that the desert was watching me, its silence too heavy, too deliberate. I'd stopped at a gas station about 30 miles back, flickering neon hole called Dusty's Fuel Stop. The clerk, an old man with a face like a crumpled map, had handed me my change with a warning. Dan T. drive past mile marker 67 after midnight. Things get funny out there. His eyes lingered on me, like he was sizing up whether I'd listen. I'd chuckled, tipped my cap, and walked out, figuring he was just some desert eccentric spinning yarns to scare truckers. But as I drove on, his words stuck, burrowing into the back of my mind like a splinter. The radio didn't help. It had been cutting in and out for the last hour, spitting static laced with faint whispers, fragments of voices that sounded like they were calling from underwater. Turn ... back. One seemed to say before dissolving into a hiss. I twisted the dial, but every station was the same. Static, whispers, silence. I shut it off, letting the hum of the engine and the squeak of my wipers clearing dust more than rain fill the void. My thoughts drifted to home. My daughter Lily, giggling over her cereal in the morning. My wife Sarah, leaving a note on the fridge. Asterisk, don't forget to call. God, I missed them. These runs were supposed to pay the bills, but they were stealing time I'd never get back. The first hint of trouble came around mile marker 65. I noticed it because the number was painted in faded yellow, chipped at the edges like someone had taken a hammer to it. 10 minutes later, I saw it again, same marker, same chipped paint, same crooked lean. I frowned, checking my odometer. It hadn't moved nearly enough for me to have looped back. Tired eyes, I told myself. Asterisk, you're seeing things. But the moon wasn't helping. It hung low, too bright, too still, like it was glued to the sky. The stars didn't twinkle, either just cold pinpricks that seemed to stare back. I rubbed my face trying to shake the unease, but it clung like damp clothes. The road stayed empty. No oncoming headlights, no taillights fading in my rear view. Just me and the highway, stretching into a darkness that felt ... wrong, thicker than it should be. Like the air itself was turning to ink. I'd seen fog before, heavy stuff that swallowed your beams, but this wasn't fog. It was like driving toward the edge of the world, where light gave up and surrendered. My gut churned. Memories of old ghost stories my dad used to tell me, creeping in tales of roads that didn't let you go. I pushed them down, focusing on the white lines, the hum of the tires, the weight of the wheel in my hands. Then I saw it. Mile marker 67. The numbers glowed faintly in my headlights. And beyond it, the road vanished into a wall of black. Not shadows, not darkness, just a void that ate my high beams like they were nothing. I flicked to brights, but the light died at the edge, swallowed whole. It was like staring into a tar pit, thick and endless, or ink spreading in water, consuming everything. My heart kicked up, pounding against my ribs. Just drive through it, I thought. Asterisk, it's just a trick of the night. But the clerk's warning echoed. Asterisk, things get funny out there. Asterisk, I eased into the black patch, and the world changed. The engine's roar muted, like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. The dashboard flickered, gauges spinning wildly before settling on gibberish fuel. Full, then empty, then full again. My watch stopped dead. The second hand stuck at 12:03. The GPS blinked, searching. In a loop, its screen casting a sickly green glow. Time itself felt wrong. My thoughts sluggish, like wading through syrup. Keep going, I told myself, but my mind screamed. Asterisk, turn back. Get out. In the void, things moved. Just beyond the hood, faint silhouettes shifted tall, thin shapes that bent and twisted in ways that made my skin crawl. They weren't human, not quite, their edges blurring like smoke. I couldn't look directly at them. My eyes slid away like they refused to focus. The air in the cab turned cold, metallic, like blood on a hot blade. A thump rattled the undercarriage, sharp and sudden, like I'd hit something alive. My hands shook, but I kept driving, the wheels slick with sweat. The whispers came back, louder now, inside my head. Welcome ... home. I wanted to scream, but my voice felt trapped, smothered by the dark. Then, like breaking the surface, after a deep dive, I was out. The blackness spat me back onto the highway, my headlights flaring to life. The road looked the same, cracked pavement, grass-choked shoulders, but it wasn't. A sign loomed ahead. Welcome to Eldridge. My stomach dropped. This was supposed to be Eerie. I'd driven this route a dozen times. Eerie was the next town, with its neon-lit diner and cheap motel. Eldridge? No such place. Checked my GPS, still frozen, useless. My phone showed no bars, just a blank screen mocking me. The landmarks were wrong. The gas station up ahead was a Chalette, had a jagged logo ID never seen, like something scratched into stone. Houses along the road were mirrored, their front doors on the wrong side, windows flipped like a negative image. Parked cars had license plates in a sickly teal, not Nevada's blue and silver. The air smelled off, acrid like burning plastic instead of desert dust. A deer crossed the road, but its antlers branched impossibly like fractal patterns twisting into themselves. Billboards flickered as I passed, ads shifting 1 second for a soda brand I didn't know. The next for something in a language I couldn't read, all sharp angles and curves. My mind raced, grasping for anchors. Asterisk, this isn't real. Remember Illy the diner's cherry pie? The motel's creaky bed? You're dreaming. But the weight of the wheel, the cold leather under my hands, felt too solid. A memory hit me. Lily's drawing of our house taped to the fridge. Was it still there in this world? Did this world even have my family? I shook my head, trying to focus. But the road kept pulling me forward, like it had a mind of its own. I pulled into what should have been Ely's Diner, its sign now reading Eldridge Eatery, in a font that hurt to look at. The bell jingled as I walked in, the sound too sharp, like glass breaking. The patrons turned, their faces blank, eyes like empty sockets. I approached the waitress, her uniform a shade too bright, like it was glowing under black light. "Hey," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to get to Ely. Can you point me the right way?" She tilted her head, her smile frozen. "Ely, I don't understand. There's no such place." The words hit like a punch. The other patrons stared, their forks paused midair, their eyes unblinking. The air grew thick, the smell of burnt plastic stronger now, mixed with something rotten. I backed away, heart hammering, and stumbled back to my truck. Fumbling for my wallet, I pulled out my ID. My hands froze. The photo was me, but the name read Jacob Harlan, not mine. The birth date was wrong decades off. The face in the picture had my features, but the eyes were cold, lifeless. Like they belonged to someone who'd never laughed with Lily or kissed Sarah goodnight. I dropped the card, my breath hitching. I looked up, and the sky sealed it. 2 moons hung there, one bright, one dim, like twins watching me. This wasn't my timeline, not my world. The highway hadn't just taken me somewhere else, it had rewritten me, erased the life I knew. The whispers came again, soft and mocking. "You're home now." I gripped the wheel, the engine still idling, stared down the black ribbon of Highway 6. It stretched on, endless, waiting. And I knew, deep in my bones, I'd never find my way back.